Hey, Grace families. Brian coming to you from my humble abode, where I have been kind of locked down in place, as many of us have been in this season. First thing I want to express is how much I need you to know that Grace staff, the Blender leadership, Mel, Lucy, and I, how much we are all praying for you constantly, daily. You're in our thoughts, you're in our prayers. We want to know how to best support you in this time. Please drop a comment below. Reach out to us at office@gracetucson.org. Any needs that you have. We have the Benevolence Fund. We also have set up a new crisis fund specifically for this COVID-19 outbreak that we're experiencing. We need to know how best to support you and to help you in everything that you're going through. It's our intention that we provide you with at least weekly updates, weekly resources that you'll see on the page below, with podcast and book recommendation and activity recommendations that you can use with your family, that you can all use to spend quality time together in this season. Last week I talked about Deuteronomy chapter 6 and how important it is that when our children wake with us, when we eat with them, when we walk with them, before we put them to sleep, that we are writing the words of God and the promises of God on their hearts and on their minds, even physically on their foreheads, and wrapping the promises of God on their wrist. And I don't want to detract you from that. Focus on that in this season. As parents, you are primary disciple makers of your kids. I'm here to walk with you in this because there's a lot in the last couple of weeks that has helped me expose even some of the places as a parent myself where I've fallen short in this most important mandate from God. This last week specifically, I've been drawn to this whole idea of how our words might not be meeting our actions. I think last week I spoke about how our kids are watching us, and that's so true. They're looking at us, and that can be a frightening prospect. It can be a promising prospect. It just kind of depends on how we make it. And if we're going to own that reality that our kids are looking at us right now, probably more than ever, more validated than ever, we're more exposed than we ever have been as parents to see how we're reacting in this season. What kind of attitude are we taking? How are we living out that attitude? How do our words that we've spoken to our kids about how we follow God, how we should follow God, how are those matching what we're actually living out in a day-to-day basis right now? And one particular story that I've been drawn to has been with Mary and Martha when it comes to Lazarus and expectations of Jesus. And we see this in John chapter 11. Please read the whole chapter. I'm not going to read the whole chapter to you right now, but here's kind of the cliff notes, spark notes, whatever the vernacular is these days to describe a synopsis of what it is that I want to portray. But we have this situation where Mary, the sister of Lazarus, comes to Jesus and says, if you had only been there, if you were there when we first called you, if you would have just come, my brother wouldn't have died. Wouldn't have died. It's kind of this amazing profession of faith right up front. Like, I know beyond any doubt that if you would have just been here at this time, you would have saved my brother from dying. right? And we kind of get through the reading of John chapter 11 that maybe that's true. If Jesus was there, then he probably would have saved Lazarus from dying. And it's this kind of amazing expression of faith, right? Like, I know that you're the King of Kings. I know that you were sent by God. I know beyond any doubt that if you were just here, my brother would not be dead. I know, she says. My brother would be dead. Like, that's really amazing, just profound faith. And some of the best of us critics today can be saying, how in the world could you know? What do you mean you knew? You don't know that Jesus would have saved your brother. But no, Mary's saying, I knew. And then it comes to this place where Jesus finally shows up. And he says, all right, let's go to the tomb. How did Mary respond? Her response was, whoa, what do you mean go to the tomb? We can't go to the tomb. He's been dead for days. The stench will be unbearable. The stench. Jesus, what are you talking about? We can't go to the tomb. You're done. It's over. Your time to prove yourself was back then, before I encountered this chaos that I'm in now. You should have proven yourself then, before I had to go through this loss that I'm struggling with. Parents, what do we do with this? There was so much faith, there was so much certainty before the tragedy. There was every reason to believe in Jesus, in his message, before Mary got to the tragedy that she was in. She was so sure, she even said to Jesus himself, if you had only been here, my brother wouldn't have died. I know who you are. Why weren't you here then? And then, when God decides to really test her faith, she says, oh, no. No. What do you mean, go to the tomb? No, that's going to be unbearable. It's going to stink. What do you mean you're going to open up the tomb? It's going to be horrid. That's going to be disgusting. Why are you doing that? No, I'm not behind going to my brother's tomb. Can you relate? Are you picking up what I'm putting down? Where is it this week and this past week where your faith as an individual, as a follower of Christ, has been questioned, has been tested? Where can you sympathize with Mary? Where can you identify the areas where maybe you did a great job up until now talking the talk, but God is calling you to walk the walk? I know for me personally, there's lots of excuses that I've made as a single parent, not just as a single parent, but a father that has every right and every reason to fall on excuses of managing retail and excusing time with my kids for the sake of managing retail, of following God's call which led me away from my kids in a very real and practical way for 2 years while I finished seminary, to coming back from seminary with one expectation of how my kids should react to me coming back from seminary, and my own expectations of the time that I would have with them versus the reality of how it's all played out. Parents, the expectations of the ways that we'd like a relationship with our children to be, and the way we want them to play out, and the way that we think that God should be present and intervene in those situations, doesn't always play out that way. That's why I want us to remember what Pastor Dwayne talked about in last week's sermon. If you haven't seen it, go back and watch it. It's why my last video I shared with you about Deuteronomy 6 is so important. If you haven't watched it, go back and watch it. But it's up to us to take advantage of the opportunities that we do have with our children, to talk to them about faith. That doesn't mean we need theological diplomas, Bible degrees. On the contrary, all Moses was trying to tell to future generations was just talk to your children about what God has done for you. When they wake up, when you eat with them, when you have that valuable time with them, don't neglect that opportunity to talk to them about God. Share your stories about God with them. Do your best to not be a Mary where we sit there and we say with our words, yes, God, I believe. If you were there, you should have done this. And then when God says, fine, I'm here, I'm going to act, you say, no. You say, that doesn't make sense. The stench is going to be too bad if you open up that tomb. But when Jesus did open up that tomb, Lazarus was raised from the dead. There was even a greater miracle, a greater response to the promise that God had been given and promising through scriptures that entire time, that he was the life and resurrection. That yes, maybe if he had been there, he would have kept Lazarus from dying. But how much better is it now that God can show his promises through the resurrection of Lazarus, and not just merely the saving of him dying. Parents, my encouragement to you this week is that you take advantage of every minute that you can have with your kids. I know that from 8 a.m. to 8 p.m., it's not the same because you're working. You have your own screen time you have to manage. You're trying to provide for your kids and your family the same way you have been. I know that you're struggling with screen time with your kids because there's screen time with school and there's their own screen time they're used to having. I get it. It's not necessarily just, Pastor Brian, I know I'm here with my kid for, an extra 12 hours a day that I'm not used to. I get it. But my encouragement to you is that you hold on to the promises of God, that you hold on to your biblical mandate that you've had from the get-go. All right. We're reaching about 15 minutes here. That's longer than I intended. I want you to know that you are loved. You're being prayed for constantly. And please reach out to us if there's anything that you need. I love you guys. Have a great week.